people supporting you, people even standing in the outside for you. How do you feel about this ecstatic moment? Do you feel as if you've become legend?
Iulian Tatu, a Romanian-born law student and poet, if you have not already heard, bends the language barrier with pen and paper, as his muse takes flight and becomes a masterful merge of traditional writing values with modern memories. Blackbird is a testament to the resilient nature of the creative spirit and to the determination of a young man in relentless pursuit of his dream. I mean, guys, please. So, the collection itself is a story in 6 acts, in which you contemplate movement, belonging, the act of writing, anxieties about growing up, growth, and change. Tell us more about the process of how you structured your storytelling and the manuscript in those 6 parts.
So, Lexi, all of these poems were written throughout about 1.5 years of my life. And when I wanted to form the story, I read all of them, and my sister will remember because she helped me do it. We looked at all the poems and placed them into what I'd say were like genres. And then I noticed that, surprisingly, they were very coherent, and they did tell the story. So then I had just had to place each genre before one or the other, and that is where the act structure came about, because the poems in themselves inform one another, and throughout the whole collection, metaphors are shared through poems and through other poems, and it makes this kind of metaphorical framework that informs the story told in the collection.
So then, to build on your response and also the blurb of the collection, what is this collection about to you?
So I think for me, this collection was wrote in a very interesting period of my life. I think many of us here that are students can attest to the fact that we're in years where we're formulating our identities as adults. We've just come out of being children. And I think this collection really just shows how I navigated becoming an adult, finding my own way, and just carving out your own nook of being yourself, past your childhood, past forming yourself. Yeah.
And just to add on to that, I think as young people, we have a lot to share that I think everyone can take. We've grown up in a very different time. Post-COVID, the world is different, and everyone experiences this, but I think there's something very unique there that is important for everybody to see. In your bio, it speaks to this cross-cultural journey that has profoundly shaped your perspective, fueling this passion for writing. I'm interested in how these concepts of belonging and immigration have inspired this collection and your writing in general. So please tell us more about that and your inspirations as a whole for this collection.
So, sorry if that was loud, guys. Yes, in my bio it says that I've lived this multicultural life, and I have. I mean, when I came to Tahiti when I was little, I couldn't speak English. Romanian was the only language I spoke. I mean, I only lost, I think, my thick European accent at about grade 7, I think it was. I'm not sure. My friends in the crowd will probably correct me. And no, so it's just such a combination of influences and different mythologies and stories and ways of thinking that really informed my writing. And I think when you read it, it's very apparent. Many poems come from different bits of my life. Some, like Know Thyself, come from the part influenced by Hellenism, and other parts will come from love for theatre, Romanian culture, all types of things. And I think it shows how multifaceted life can be, and I think that just informs what's in the manuscript by itself. Yeah.
Thank you. In a moment, I will get into some more specific questions to poems you've read and others that really stuck with me. But in talking about titles, they're all quite simple in this collection. So how do you choose the title of a poem? And do you think that has any significance to how someone reads a poem beyond the title itself?
So I think the titles of poems are probably the most important thing to get right. Myself, when I get inspiration, it will just be a word, an image that I like Blackbird. It's an image, it's a concept I like, and then I'll sit with it for a few days, and then the poem will come to me. And I think that the title is very important because it's part of the reading experience. Like in Know Thyself, for example, it's a perfect example. Those words don't appear anywhere else in that poem, but they inform your entire understanding of the poem. So I think titles are paramount, and I think it's just important that they are part of that reading experience. And yeah, most titles just come from an image that I like and I think is profound.
For the Sahitians in the room, Know Thyself embodies more than what the poem does, I suppose. No offense to the school, but a trauma of growing up, but also what we've learned and we've taken from the school.
Yeah.
So to get into some of the poems, in general, you're a very theatrical person, you're a performer. Like Emmanuel's poetry, we saw poetry can be a performance. So in your poem Stage, which I really loved, it also like evoked that dramatic side of myself as a drama student as well. Tell us more about the connection for you between poetry and performance, and how, I know, knowing you have this theatrical persona, how that influenced and influences your poetry.
So I think for me, theatre and poetry are quite close-knit, but it's purely because, to me, poetry has always been another form of dramatic monologue. And I think that's informed by a love for Shakespeare and just love for a lot of classical poetry that tends to be in dramatic monologue fashion, like Ulysses by Tennyson and If by Kipling. Many of those poems are dramatic monologue, and I just found it a natural transition from my love for theatre into a love for poetic writing, because they sort of reflect each other. And everything in theatre is intentional and crafted. So is everything in writing poetry and anything that informs that, yeah.
Moving to the next poem, Know Thyself. As we've understood, it's our motto at Sahiti, but the poem itself opens up this real sense of conflict between trying to understand who you are and who external influences expect you to be. And beyond a school environment, that I suppose is what it feels like to grow up. You are trying to figure out who you are in this context of where you come from and where you're going. So with these conflicted feelings in mind, why did you choose this poem as the collection's interlude? Because specifically that's how it's structured.
So after I finished writing the manuscript for Blackbird, I started working on my second one, which we're halfway done, so expect another launch next year. But no, so I wrote Know Thyself as the first poem for the second collection. And I had to read through it. And I just thought that, no, this is the perfect point at which I could put a bit of knowledge from the future into Blackbird that is kind of just this moment in time. And I think choosing Know Thyself as this piece that looks retrospectively and prospectively, I think adding that piece in the middle of the manuscript was able to retroactively change a lot of the symbolism and make it more profound.
Absolutely, and it feels like it kind of bridges a gap in a way, or it's like a turn in the story, because you are dealing with like these bigger questions of what it means at this moment in time, but then you do move beyond that into the present. And I saw that in a poem like Return. It's haunted by anxiety and this newfound confidence. Once again, there is that conflict and that like duality to it. So tell us more about the process of balancing these opposing feelings and writing your way through them.
So I think a lot of my work, prose-wise, not poetry-wise, tends to be very argumentative. And I tend to write as much as I can. My friends won't say that I do. But I tend to try to argue both sides. And I think, especially in poetry, it's much easier to do that through metaphor and through extended metaphor, which are my favorite devices, because it's so easy to justify something and to explain something through an image, through a concept, and you contrast that with something opposing. And I think that's how, I do it.
To the poem Blackbird, which is the title of your collection, there are multiple questions, so maybe we'll go back and forth with them. My first question is, why did you choose Blackbird as the titular piece to represent the whole collection? So
before Know Thyself, Blackbird was the final poem I had written. in preparation for this manuscript. And I remember looking throughout the book, and I was playing with a lot of poems to be the titular ones. I mean, I remember, for those of you that have the manuscript, and for those of you that will buy it, I was playing with Cauldron as the title. I was playing with Stage as the title. But then when I had to reread through everything a couple of times, I read Blackbird and I saw that a lot of the thematic threads of everything else I had written was present inside that poem. I mean, the Blackbird image itself isn't symbolic of anything specifically. And because there are so many struggles or conflicts, not really struggles, conflicts, throughout the manuscript, I thought the Blackbird, because it's such a multi-applicable image, would be perfect as the title, because it applies to everything, not just to knowing oneself, not just to academic struggle, but that poem in itself encapsulated the core movement of the collection. Yeah.
And maybe then you've already answered my next question, because it ties into why you chose it as the title of the collection. But why then was it important for you for this to be the last poem of the standard collection before the ending has the, what is it at the ending again?
The epilogue.
The epilogue, before the epilogue, why was this the final piece?
So, especially in theatre and film and literature, I love an ending that changes everything retroactively. And I think Blackbird as an image at the end, being the final poem, it's the only poem I didn't move. Everything else got moved. Nothing is in the same place as it was in the beginning of the manuscript. I left Blackbird at the end because I like that it retroactively makes everything connected and makes everything deeper and inform itself.
In your poem Fury, you shift from burning rage to tearful vulnerability. What does this hoping the tears will stay say about your emotional response to the world with which you're confronted? Do you think gentleness is preferable to rigidity and harshness?
So I think that poem was written because throughout my life I've had a lot of contradictory conflict, if I can say it like that, because many things throughout my life I've had to accept or be grateful for, but then those same things have also facilitated, issues and various problems. I mean, high school, for example, high school is a multifaceted thing. So it's a thing you love and it's a thing that you hate. So I always say Saheti is my favorite and least favorite place in the world. It's my favorite place in the world. Please give me this venue again. And I think that's where Fury comes from. And I think, to the second part of that question, I think both are very necessary functions of the human condition. I mean, you need to be able to be rigid, but you also need to be able to show vulnerability. And I think Fury just is a poem that explores how those two things interact when they're forced to be in the same situation.
I'd like to move on to one of my favorite topics of conversation, writing about writing.
Yes.
And talking about it. I feel like as writers, it's so lovely for someone to want to know more about this thing that is so meaningful to us. So firstly, in I Hate Poetry, in the first stanza, you start by saying, I hate poetry when long and pretentious. I hate poetry in all of its edges, which speaks to me to that over-analysis and interpretation of poetry that we experience at school that always demands some sort of answer. And I've lost my place, so let me find it. I'm so sorry. But your poetry itself is so lyrical and theatrical, and you use these big words and strong imagery and vocabulary. So to me, this speaks to how different people and readers experience art, which informs what we take from it. But what I'd like to hear from you is how you approach this difference between analysis and critique, and how you've written the poems or the process of writing this collection.
So myself, I really have a disdain for over-analyzing art. I think it's something that should be read and enjoyed. And I think that the process of experiencing it should allow you to feel what you feel. I don't think art should be put under constant scrutiny. But I think when making art, one should be very exact and very surgical because I think making something that people experience is one thing, but in order for people to experience, everything has to be done with intention. So I think in analyzing and experiencing art, I think we should be a lot more, how does this make me feel? How does this inform my understanding of myself? And I think that most of the structure and intentionality behind it should be left to the artists, because anyone can create art. And I think art is something that should be experienced and not surgically dissected. It was put together surgically for you to experience.
Yes, please. I hope so. In About Poetry, I want to read something that stuck out to me. You didn't read this.
No.
I'm not crazy. Yes, I read this and I really loved it. You said, yes, art is emotion, art is expression, but never forget its true purpose, to help escape, to uplift our souls, not shackle us to this wretched world, which does speak to what we have been speaking about thus far. But my question about that poem and that little extract, why is expression in the form of writing specifically so important to you?
I think that writing, in any form, I think everyone should do it, because I just think you can't just keep all your thoughts and pent-up emotions and everything inside your mind. I think, at least for me, once I get something on the page, it allows me to understand what I'm looking at more, because then I can actually, it's physical. When thoughts and feelings are ether, they're much harder to compute or understand. But when they're actual physical things that you can interact with and change, I think it allows you to experience them in a different way.
Which then brings me to my next point in your poem, Poetic Anxiety, which is so real to me. You say, what if they cannot accept, what if they will not expect all of my ideas which take form in art, and I regret these words I wish to impart. And that reminds me of this thought that I've heard repeatedly from artists and writers and all types of creative people. Once we release our art into the world, it's not ours anymore. And it becomes what the people want to take from it and what speaks to them, you know. I said earlier, as a joke, but also it's very real, you can rip out whatever page you want, you can circle and highlight and choose and take from it what you will. The book still costs 200 Rand. I think, yes, that's the price? Yes, 200 Rand. After this, please buy. So it is for people to take. So many questions come to me. Firstly, what is poetry to you? Because everybody analyzes and reads so differently and we look for different things, you can look at a poem and go, this is absolute garbage, but look, the writer is Shakespeare, you know? So to you, what does it mean to you? What makes a good poem to you?
So I think for me, good poetry, and poetry in and of itself, I think poetry for me is just always going to be, and the simplest way I can put it, it's a moment in time. You know, it's a crystallized, frozen moment in time that you can revisit and that you can look back on. Because something that Shakespeare wrote 100 years ago, or however long ago that was, because I don't pay attention in English, which is ironic. But anything that was written that long ago will have the same experience, the same feelings evoked by you as it would then. And I think that's the profound thing about poetry. It's so honest and it can take you anywhere. Like if I read a poem if I read a haiku, I'm transported there. If I read a sonnet, I'm transported there. If you read this, you're transported to a very sad bedroom, but I mean, you're transported somewhere. And yeah, that's what I think it is, yeah.
Building on this, I'm going to ask you a very general question, but then please take it where you want to take it. Bear with me. What is the message you're trying to convey with this collection by taking us into that sad bedroom? And then by extension, why do you write? I think we may have touched on this already.
So I think the purpose of the collection is really just to say, think about your thoughts and think about your feelings and try to get them in a way that you can interact with them. You know, because it's one thing to just live life, and it's another thing to actually crystallize those feelings, experience those feelings, and be able to process them and understand them in a way that's not just me sitting at my chair overthinking them, you know. That's what I think that is. And I think I write because of that. I think I write mainly from a reflective standpoint, because I'll have a thought informed by whatever image I see. Like, I'll see a color. There's a poem informed by color here. And I'll write about it, and I'll write, how does this make me feel? Why do I feel this way? And I think that that's a very important thing to be able to do. And I think that's why I write.
I want to take us out of this for a moment and then bring us back in, for a reason that you will momentarily understand. I'd like to hear more, and I think, at least for me, as somebody who works in this industry and is a writer and is interested in this, tell us about how this collection came to be in terms of the publishing process, and then I'll get into my philosophical, emotional question.
So this collection has a very funny story. My one friend, Mahmoud, wherever you are, had a cousin who was in the poetry anthology that Sasta so lovingly had mentioned. And he said, "You write, man. Come to this thing." And I was like, "Sure." And the night before I was panicking, and I sorted all the poems out with my sister, and I printed them all out, and I went to this thing. And I walked up to Sasta and I was like, "Hello, you're the publisher." Bah! And she was like, "No, send it to me." And I said, "Okay." And then I had a wonderful time with that book launch, and I happened to win a prize, and then we got in contact, and she said, "Your writing is not too shabby." And then the rest has just been history. I think it's all come about so spontaneously and so touch and go. I think it was all just, in a way, it was all just meant to be. You know, had I not had that one friend who happened to have that one cousin who happened to be doing this one thing, we wouldn't all be here today. And I think that, yeah, that's just the journey. I'm very fortunate, very grateful to be here, and I'm just very excited about the whole thing. Yeah.
And we are indeed very happy to have you and to have this collection exist. Please buy afterwards.
Thank you, Lech.
My second last question takes us from that, jumps from that, and that question of why do you write? And I'd like to know, why was it important, beyond, okay, I wrote this to process these feelings, to express myself in this way, to have this outlet, why was it then important to share it with the world, and by happenstance for it to become this, to then print these books and sell them and to get that message out there?
So I never really planned on releasing anything publicly. But then as the year went on, not this year, last year, I'd give my poems to my professors at Youth Adverts, and then they'd all tell me, "Publish this thing, stop sending it to me." True story, by the way. And then I took a think about it, and I said, art is wonderful, and art made for yourself is great. But I don't really see the point of it if I'm not really sharing it with people. Because I'd always share it with people. I'd share it with my professors, I'd share it with my friends. Not so much with my family, because I like to keep things secret, Mama. Love you. But no, I think it's just, if I make something and I think it's good, I think it's a wonderful thing to share. And I think it's important that people can also take something away about themselves from whatever art is produced. And I think that's why I decided to share it publicly, yeah.
To echo that sentiment, as artists, at the end of the day, we are also trying to make a living, and we appreciate that all of the support. Thank you for being here, thank you for supporting our work and for coming to these events. Please continue to support independent businesses and small bookstores and these things, because everybody is trying to make a living here as well. And for artists, it is very difficult. So my final question is a statement and then a question. It is that in sharing your work like this, it is, firstly, you're very vulnerable and you share a lot about yourself in this collection. And that's a very brave thing to do. So there is this aspect of vulnerability to this collection. What I'd like to know from you is, how has, it's a scary thing and it's exciting, but how has this whole experience so far been for you? How are you feeling about it? And please, make it a positive or negative.
Yeah.
Tell us about what this means to you.
Right. So I think I had a lot of anxiety about publishing this manuscript, because it is in a way, it's saying, "Here I am, world, lay waste to me." And it's very nerve-wracking. But I think as I've gone through the process, and as I've had other people look at it and write and discuss it, and I think people have just been so supportive and so caring, and also I'm very annoying and pedantic when it comes to how I write and how I craft certain phrases. And I think having everyone A notice the vulnerability and B also notice bits and pieces I've done intentionally. I think all of that really made me be like, you know what, no, it's not something to keep for myself, it's not something to hide. I think it's something that should be shared. And now I'm anxious now because this is the first time I'm doing this, but I'm very quite confident and proud of what I've done and happy with how everyone's come to support. Thank you everybody for coming. And I'm very proud of how everyone's taken and interpreted what I've done and taken it to heart.
Thank you. And as your friend, I appreciate you having me here. Of course, I'm also very proud of you and very excited for you and all your success to come. So that's it for my questions, but I'd love to hear if the audience has any that you'd like to ask me. Raise your hand, I would like to.
They better be nice.
Hello, Julian.
Hi, Ivan.
How's it going?
Shut up.
So, I technically have roughly 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
All bundled together. Firstly, I wanted to really just understand, at what point did you realize after writing poetry, I got something people want to read? Because people have been making poetry for centuries, as long as human history. At what point did you realize it would be your destiny to write books, to release it for all of us? That was my first question.
Yeah.
My second question would be, it's so lovely to see everybody here. So many people supporting you, people have been standing outside for you. How do you feel about this monument to your triumph, this ecstatic moment? And you feel as if you've become legend?
I think I really knew I had something after I had written 20 poems. Because I wouldn't have thought about publishing something if I had like 4 or 5 poems. So as soon as I had a decent amount of writing, I actually reread all of them. I was like, this is something that should be shared. And once it's developed more, I should definitely think about publishing. And to the second part of that hideous question, I'm very ecstatic. I'm very humbled that everybody here has come to support and come either from far and from wide to come and support. And I'm very, very pleased that all of you have been able and willing. Jeez, willing is important, guys. I'm very glad that you guys are willing to support. And no, I don't think I've become legend just yet. I think this is a monument to my triumph. But I think I need to publish a few more poetry collections, and then maybe one day I'll be one of the greats.
I should like to congratulate you on your brave effort. I once heard an author say about his debut novel that it was like taking his clothes off in front of strangers.
Yeah.
So you have done that. You've made yourself vulnerable. You have exposed yourself. So what I'd like to, just 2 observations, but also kind of questions, is the one is about the language and the other one is about identity. You speak about the fact that you weren't listening in the English class, but the fact of the matter is you came as somebody with a mother tongue, then you had to overcome the language barrier. So don't you think that your exploration of language, English, is as a matter of the fact that you had to learn it as a second language, and in fact a third language? We all know that Greek is sort of a foundation of English, so I think maybe you didn't know that it was an active activity that was happening. And then secondly, what being the other was, as a sociologist calls somebody, I mean, you were Romanian in a Greek school, which is supposedly very international, but still has a very distinct Hellenistic culture. I think you, probably part of your personality, you're very brave. I remember when you were a little boy and you used to ride in a country and I met you in Berlin, you wouldn't sit still for 2 minutes. This boy is going to go places. So yes, about the language and then secondly about your identity and overcoming that.
Language learning has always been a very important part of my journey. And I think being able to be articulate has always been very important. And I think that really gave me drive and made me want to be able to, especially when I was much younger, to be good at English, to be good at communicating, to be articulate. And the same in Romanian. It's important to be articulate, to be able to understand. And the same with Greek, not so much Afrikaans. But no, I think that's very important and meaningful to be able to do, especially when writing, because knowing one language is great, but when writing, there's so many influences, there's so many etymologies and things. And I think that really informs my writing, and it's been a privilege to be able to use that to my benefit. And then secondly, being other, it was very interesting throughout my life because, as all of you know, my dad is a priest. So it was always a bit interesting because, no, he's gone now. He has a wedding that he has to do now. So sorry, guys. We're not as cool as they are. But no, it's always been very interesting because there's always been this language barrier. There's always been this culture barrier. And within the culture barrier of being a Romanian, one of the only Romanian people my age in South Africa, within the South Africa culture barrier, there's been the Greek barrier, there's been an Afrikaans barrier, there's been an African barrier, there's been everything. And I don't ever think being other has been a weakness. I think it really allows you to look at things from a different perspective, detached from many of the issues plaguing how other people interact. And I think that allows for writing in a way that is not just applicable to one set of people. I think it allows for the writing to be multifaceted.
I have two questions for you. While we read your book, what mark would you like to leave while we read this book? And also the world, what mark would you like to leave with your poetry? And also you're a law student. How does it mean to try to balance the poetry and studying for the law?
So I think in terms of what mark I want to leave, I really just want to be able to produce a form of art that people find meaningful. I don't really think in terms of gravity of impact or in terms of number of copies sold, I don't think any of that really matters. I think what matters really is the fact that it means something to someone. And it means something to me, and I hope it means something to the rest of you. And in terms of being a law student and balancing it all, it's not really easy, but it's not really hard. Because no, I know that's very contradictory. I know. Don't laugh at me. I'll fire you. But seriously, it's easy because I'll find an image and it'll resonate in my mind for a very long time. And it'll stay there for a week, it'll stay there for 2 weeks. But then actually finding the time to put said image on paper is difficult. But I think I'm fortunate enough to be able to find a balance between it. Because if it's something I'm really passionate about, I will always make time. If that means losing half an hour of sleep, that's fine. Because then I get to do cool stuff like this. But yeah, that's how that works. Yeah, thank you.
The title and the titular poem of the book is Blackbird. And after listening, it seems like this figure has really impacted you in a significant way, significant enough to become the title of your book. If it's not too much to ask, what or who is this Blackbird? You don't need to name drop, but if you could describe the person, how they inspired you, that'd be great.
So yeah, no, Blackbird is the title of the collection, and it does inform everything that happens throughout. But Blackbird isn't really a person. It's a collection of things. It's a concept, it's systems, and it is people too. And it's all these things that combine into a single image that asks you to look back. Because the poem Blackbird is about the speaker, who is a healthy tree, and another dead tree that the blackbird sits on. And I think that the image Blackbird doesn't just speak to not being chosen like romantically, as I know many of you will probably read the poem, But it also speaks to, you know, being other, not being chosen. And I think that the image just is very applicable to many things. And because it was so widely applicable, it made sense for it to be the title. A title like Cauldron, which is the first poem in the collection, wouldn't have made sense because it doesn't really express every part of the manuscript. A title like Stage wouldn't have made sense because it doesn't express every part of the manuscript. Blackbird is a metaphor for everything that occurs in the manuscript. And that's why that's the title, yeah.
So, firstly, I want to say like a huge congratulations to you. Well done. I have two questions. My first one, as a fellow artist, like you go through a lot of trial and error and trial and error. So I want to know, what was your trial and error process like? The second question, which is in addition to that, the poems that didn't make it into the final cut, how many were they, and how do you feel about those ones that are, you know, just sitting there, not necessarily discarded, but not part of this huge collection that you made?
So I think in terms of trial and error, I'll often write a poem and then I'll leave it there for a week. Because in the same way that an image will linger in my mind for a while, I'll write a poem and the way it's written will linger in my mind for a while. Because I often find that if I sit and edit right after I write, that poem will either become much worse or much better. So I like to leave it in there to permeate for a while, and then I'll revisit it. And Sasta will know, I'd take a look at the collection, like one day, change something, come back a week later, change a few more things, change some things back. But I really do like to take my time in terms of trial and error because it's not something I like to rush. And secondly, God, what was the second part of that question? I'm such a... Oh yes, the poems, yes, no, sorry, I'm such a donut. Yes, no, so there were only 2 poems that didn't make it. Because I had a manuscript of about 42, I think it was. And this was before Sasta, so she doesn't know about these poems. They weren't bad, but they weren't read in conjunction with everything else. They just felt very out of place, and they didn't make sense to include, not because they were terrible, or because they were short or long or anything of that nature. They were just marginally worse. And again, they just didn't make sense in the narrative and story I was trying to tell. So they got excluded, yeah. And it took about 4 reads of the entire thing to be like, you know what? Bye-bye.
So my question is a bit of a two-part question. Alexi mentioned that you are a law student, but the way you structure your poems and the way you speak about theatre and the way you speak about your love for Shakespeare, it sounds like you're very passionate about the creative arts. So what made you go the law route instead of the creative arts route? And then my second part of the question is, how do you see poetry? Is it kind of like an escapement from law, or do you write because of law?
It wasn't really terribly hard for me to want to go into law, despite all of my enjoyment of creative arts, because A, I like talking. If you guys hadn't noticed, I have a bit of a thing. I'm kind of verbose. So law is kind of a performance, really. And B, everything with the law, and like I said about the writing, everything is intentional. You know, when I'm thinking about law, when I'm writing about law, it's the same process as when I write about poetry. I'll do my research, I'll write something, it'll resonate with me for a week, and then I'll revisit it again. And I think poetry and I think law and performative arts are very similar in that they both have to be intentionally crafted. They both have to be able to say, hey, I'm out there, this is what I'm doing. And I think it was just, for me personally, it wasn't a terribly difficult transition, because just that's how I related to. And I'm doing a terrible job at remembering the second half of questions now. Actually, sorry guys. I think it's not really an escape. I think it's just a form of release. I don't write to forget. I don't write to linger. I think it's more of I'm feeling this way, I'm putting it on the page, and the feeling is gone, and I can carry on. And if I want to revisit it, then I'll revisit that moment in time, and I'll have a second look, and I'll edit it and those kinds of things, yeah. Kira?
I feel like I have insider information.
You probably do.
Whether it was us in grade 8 debating on the lawns at the Saheti Fields, or whether it's now at Wits us debating on the library lawns, we always have very, very intense philosophical debates. That's like 80% of our relationship.
Yes.
So what I want to ask is, when it comes to your writing, do you think that, and one thing that I find quite interesting is like us becoming friends in grade 8 compared to us being friends now in second year, like, do you think that your writing is the birthplace of your development and your change, and this is where you start to formulate your ideas that are consistently developing into the person that you are now? Or do you think that your writing is an expression of the development that you've been through and that you've had?
I think writing facilitates that change. I think writing allows you to look back and be like, hey, this is who I was, and this is who I am now, and I'm not that same person anymore. And when I do feel that way, I'll write a second poem, and it'll be about me now. And then in the future, I'll look back on that poem, and I'll be like, what a fool. And then I'll write a new poem, and then the process will continue until another poetry collection is birthed. And I think writing facilitates that change. I think the change probably happens regardless, but I think writing highlights it and informs it. So in a way, it's both.
I first met you when you came to Italy.
Yes.
At Saheti, when you're in your final year. First of all, we're proud of you.
Thank you.
For many reasons. One, because you are one of our own. And secondly, because you're now an alumnus. And it really is a privilege to actually host you here today. And we're also very grateful that you've chosen Saheti as one of the places where you're launching the book. So it really is a great day for Saheti, because you are one of our own. I come from a family that also writes poems. My daughter Nadia wrote poems when she was 12. And my mother-in-law is, bless her soul, had written many poems, many collections, many books. I can say that poets are special people. They're special for many reasons, because they harbor thoughts that are organized in a way that's different to many people. And they have, you mentioned courage earlier on. And the important thing is that you have the courage to actually put those thoughts out, whether on a piece of paper or in a book, as you've done, which is a great thing, because most people don't have that courage and don't have that bravery. And I heard you speak about a poem called Fury, which to me is a poem that I think is written about the pain of growing up. I haven't read your book, or your collection, about the pain of growing up. And it is a painful process. What advice would you have, or do you have, for young people growing up? One, with regard to how they deal with their own thoughts, their own conflicts, their own disappointments. You spoke about not being chosen. That is, that's life. We're not always chosen for everything, but young people do get disappointed, and they deal with their disappointments in different ways. What advice would you have for young people who, growing up, first of all? Secondly, what advice would you have for a young person, or any person for that matter, as to how to express their thoughts? Because it is a very special thing that you're able to do. I remember my mother-in-law saying, when shopping, had a thought, which you mentioned earlier on, and would use a tilter to write down the thoughts, scribble it down before she forgot it.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know how you took those thoughts, whether it was something that you wrote down immediately, but anyway, what advice would you have for a young person? And well done.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your hospitality. I think for young people especially, I think it's very important to be able to find a way to express your feelings and to let them out. And it's either with, like, for me it's through poetry and performance, for other people it's through music, for other people it's through sport. And I think no matter what it is, I think you have to find that thing that lets you express yourself and lets you pour all of that energy out. Because I think if you don't find a way to do that, you become stunted and you become aggressive. And I think no matter what it is, for some people it's academics, for some people, like I said, it's music and other things. And I think it's very important that you find that way of releasing that energy and those emotions and those thoughts. And that, I think, is my best advice. And that just comes with exploring. I think young people make the mistake of not trying new things, and not trying to do things out of fear of being rejected in those things. I think it's important. Yeah. And thank you so much for your wonderful hospitality. Can we get a round of applause, please?